Hello and welcome to another episode here on the Sports Daily Media Network YouTube channel. I'm your host, Sean Vowells. I've got Mike Koomar with me, and tonight, Mike, it's a little bit of breaking news. Yesterday, it was announced that Kansas State head coach Jerome Tang would be fired. That is something that obviously became a real possibility late in the season here. Now, what wasn't I didn't see coming was that Kansas State is trying to fire him for cause. So, what was your initial reaction when you saw the news, and then on top of it, that they're going to try and get out of this buyout?
Look, at the end of the day, we've been big fans of Jerome Tang for some time, had a great first season at Kansas State, and since then it just really hasn't worked out, despite having a pretty high salary for NIL back-to-back years. They've put a lot of money into that program, and Coach Tang just didn't get the right players and the right fit into that program. With that being said, firing for cause, I don't think there's any real legal binding for this. He didn't do anything wrong in terms of doing anything except for lose basketball games. I think what they're really trying to fire him for cause was do his press conference after a pretty embarrassing loss to Cincinnati last week. He said a lot of things about how his team didn't deserve to wear the uniform, how they needed to play better, how it was an embarrassment to fans, and they're trying to use that to a clause in the contract that says that he defamed Kansas State University's name. However, I think that's totally ridiculous. I mean, you look at
Yeah,
what he did in that press conference. He didn't do anything wrong. He took ownership. He took accountability. He said that he needs to fix this. That there would be changes next season, and that he needed to make some changes quickly. That the fans deserve better. That the community deserves better. That the students deserve better, and that they were going to get it right. And they're going to have practice at 6 a.m. the next day. That's pretty much all that he said.
yeah,
So to fire for cause is crazy. I understand what Kansas State's trying to do. They're trying to save themselves from paying $18 million, which is a really big buyout for that school. However, I think they're going about it the completely wrong way. And I think it really poorly reflects on that community at Kansas State. I think it's kind of embarrassing. And if I was a coaching candidate, I would kind of steer clear of Kansas State University because clearly they're coming after the character of Jerome Tang. And I don't know if you're going to find a more decent man in college basketball.
the we talked about this, Mike, when Michigan fired their coach for cause. You don't fire a coach for cause if they're winning enough, no matter
Yeah.
no matter what's happening. Now, I think it's going to go to court, and at least he will get upwards of half of his buyout
Yeah.
because
He'll get more.
the
Yeah.
language in the contract is extremely vague, and they're going to argue that the players were the ones who embarrassed themselves, which is going to be a little bit funny from the outside.
Yeah.
That, but I didn't really have anything wrong with what Jerome Tang said. It's been a really bad
No.
year for them. Like, there's no these conversations are obviously happening within the locker room. So to show the fans that you care like that, I don't think that's a bad thing. Now, some people said he might have gone over the top a little bit, but I don't know. I'd rather have my coach care and not accept losing what was happening to them. And Mike, they weren't just losing; they were getting throttled on their home floor, and
Yeah.
ultimately, on top of the no names on the back of the jerseys for the Houston game, he also he didn't he made his players do the scout for Houston. Nate Johnson led the scout instead of one of the assistants. Look, they lost by 15. That is a huge jump from where they were at. So,
No kidding. Yeah.
but it
And
became
look,
very clear, Mike, that this was probably going to happen after a third straight year of underachieving, and unfortunately for Jerome, it happens a little bit earlier than we maybe thought.
yeah, I think so. And you would have liked to have been able to see him finish out the season and try to reflect and get better from where they were. Pretty low point in that point. But to your point, losing by 15 on the road to Houston is a whole lot better than getting blown out by 35 points to Cincinnati at home. So clearly something spoke to that team. And look, if this was a fire for cause because of that, he probably would have been fired within 48 hours of that press conference. He wasn't. They waited several days and he coached one more game
Yeah.
and made some changes. So, look, you could argue that maybe he lost the locker room. And look, if you say that he should have been fired at the end of the season, I think, Sean, you and I probably would have said, yeah,
Yep.
that's fair for him to get fired. But to come after his integrity and his character and trying to do a fire for cause to save a couple $1 million is, I think, reflects very poorly on Kansas State. And if I was a candidate for this job, I would seriously consider that when you're looking at an athletic director that you want to have your back.
And in terms of just like buyouts in general, Mike, they do decrease if the person gets another job, whether it's in the media
Yes.
or another coaching job. I have a feeling he might be back in green and red and green and yellow next year on the sideline. I think you would hope that as well. But even if he were to go to TV, like that buyout probably I think instantly becomes half if he gets another job
Yeah.
and they just have to pay the difference. Um, but yeah, I think Kansas State is trying to save a few bucks here, and they're doing it in a pretty disrespectful way. They're the ones who gave Jerome Tang the contract. They are the ones who gave him the buyout to probably try and keep him from going somewhere else after that great first season. And ultimately, they don't look great in this situation either. In a year, Mike, that they're just going to want to forget. They were, like you said, that first year where they went to the Elite Eight. They were a lot of fun. We talked about the circumstances of how that happened. He's able to retain Marquise Noel, who was there under the previous coach, and he's able to bring in Keontae Johnson from Florida. And if you
Yeah.
remember, Keontae Johnson had a heart attack pretty much on the floor
Cardiac arrest. Yeah.
when he was a Gator, and there was only so many coaches and states where he could play. So I think Jerome Tang uniquely qualified both in a state that allows that, and he has had a couple of players with similar issues at Baylor. I think he sort of lucked into that, and they had a great team, and it was really fun. And after that, Mike, like you said, they've had a ton of NIL. This this job is a decent job in terms of the hierarchy of the Big 12. Now, it's not up with the Texas Techs and the BYU's, but Field of 68's job poll had it ninth out of 18 teams. I think that's probably pretty fair. They've had a lot of money. They've gotten a few highly ranked transfers over the years. They have 2 seasons around 500, tied for ninth in the Big 12 both years, but this year the bottom kind of fell out. So I think, we'll have to go into where we think Kansas State will look next, but just sort of maybe a victim of his own success a little bit with how great they were in year one.
Sure, absolutely. And look, we've seen coaches. I think Bruce Weber, the coach before Kansas at Kansas State, he had a lot of success at Kansas State, and then kind of bottomed out those last few years. It seems like Kansas State likes to give their coaches really a grace period of a couple of seasons before they want to fire them. But look, this is a program that expects excellence. Like, I think that's pretty fair to say that they are a middle tier job in the Big 12, which is a big time job in college
Yeah.
basketball. You're year in and year out consistently one of, if not the best conference in college basketball. And that's, realistically kind of their sport. Obviously football had their success over the years, but I think most Kansas State fans would say that they're more of a basketball school than a football school. With that being said, that comes with a lot more expectations. Kansas State, I don't think they've ever been to a Final Four. But they've been to the Elite Eight a couple of times under Bruce Weber and Jerome Tang, and we're pretty close to a Final Four in Tang's first year. So I think that's a bummer. Now you look at what's next for Jerome Tang. Um, I think me, along with nearly all of Baylor Nation, hopes that he's going to be back in Waco. I think we're optimistic for that. The Bears do have a new top assistant at the helm this year. But with that being said, their program has been in significant decline, almost a free fall since Jerome Tang left that
You can
program.
have
So
co-associate head coaches.
you can.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised if that's what happens. But at the end of the day, Tang was Scott Drew's right hand man for years. And it's kind of ironic that the interim coach for Kansas State is going to be another guy that he used to coach with on Scott Drew's staff. But um, I think that's the logical step. I sure hope that that's the case, and I hope he comes back to Waco and spends a few years there building us back up to a championship powerhouse, and then goes on and gets another head coaching job. I 100% think that he will have another head coaching job at some point while he's still coaching.
And I think, Mike, you can pretty much tie Jerome Tang's exit from Waco to the deterioration of your defense.
Yes,
You've had
absolutely.
some okay teams in there that have just scored a lot, but the defense was a staple of your championship level teams, and maybe
Hmm.
I think it's fair to say that team without a tournament probably would have made the Final Four or would have been a
Yeah.
significant. chance at doing that. And then,
Would have won a national
you,
championship,
you
but
know,
yeah,
after
sure.
that, it's been a little bit of tough sledding on the defensive end. So obviously, we don't
Yeah.
know that he's going back there, but I would think that he's probably not going to get a head coaching job right away, especially if this case drags on a little bit. But
Yeah.
I think he'll be head coach again one day.
I agree. And then now I think that the next thing is who's going to be the head coach at Kansas State. And there's a lot of options out here. I think one name that really comes to mind for me, look, I think Kansas State's probably looking for people with Big 12 experience. And so that's why I think Matt Brower is one guy. He's a Stephen F. Austin head coach. He's in his first season, so pretty inexperienced, but he's a guy that spent a couple of years on Grant McCaslin's staff between North Texas and Texas Tech, including the last couple of years, and clearly knows the state of the Midwest, Southwest pretty well. Spent his entire time coaching at either Wichita State or a Texas school. So he's got a lot of experience in the area. But Sean, I'm curious who else you're thinking.
I think there's a couple of big names that you're just going to hear or not. I don't know about. I don't know if a high major we'll see a high major to a high major move this year. Just
Yeah,
with the now, there's one name that might be able to do that, but I think we've seen it in football. We've seen it in basketball now. Like Kansas State would be a job that like a Duke or a North Carolina would go to when they had an opening. In Kansas State, like I don't know if there's another power conference coach that would do like a Buzz Williams last year, unless maybe he's on the way out and
yeah,
like what Richard Pitino did to go to New Mexico. But so I don't know if it's going to be that. I think there are a number of jump seat candidates that are going to be in the running here. I think Josh Schertz from St. Louis is the
yeah,
number one name. I do think that there's another job that he will go to. And in this day and age, Mike, of agents and back channeling, I don't know if being the first opening has the most appeal that it used to. Like agents know what jobs are going to open.
yeah.
Like
Oh yeah,
these coaches that Josh Schertz might be the Kansas State coach, but he's not going to be until all of the firings have been made. I think he's probably going to go to Providence, Josh Schertz. Now, in
mm.
terms of other coaches, the one high major name that I think would go there, Mike, Chris Beard from Ole Miss. It stalled out a
Mm.
little bit here. The overwhelming theory was that he'd want to get out of there. He probably had an opportunity to and didn't and wasn't really ever linked with anything. Big 12 experience. There you go.
Yeah.
Proven winner in Chris Beard. You get him a little money, more money than he has in Oxford. I could see it working.
Yeah, I think there's no question Chris Beard would be outstanding. I hope that Chris Beard does not come back to the Big 12 on my behalf as a Baylor fan. But you look at the experience he's had, went to an Elite Eight, went to a separate championship game, has proven experience winning the Big 12, was well on his way to probably winning the Big 12 with Texas before he got fired in that job. And look, he's taken Ole Miss to heights that they hadn't seen in years last year when they made the Sweet 16. So that would be a terrific hire for Kansas State. Um, it's just a matter of how desperate he is to get out of Oxford, Mississippi, and to get maybe a better job. I think 100% Kansas State is a better job than Ole Miss. You've got more interest, more intrigue, more involvement in the program. Look, Ole Miss, they're always going to be a football school, and they're never gonna, never say
Especially
never,
now.
because nobody ever thought that Texas Tech could be a basketball powerhouse because they'd never done anything until he showed up there. But a pretty lackluster season this year. You're right. It would not be a surprise if he tries to find his way and do a Big 12 job. I think another one that he could be linked to actually is Arizona State as well, if Bobby Hurley gets fired. But man, I think Chris Beard would be a great hire if Kansas State wanted to go that route.
And in terms of the other jump seat candidates, Mike, there's a ton really. I
Yeah.
think your MAC coaches are probably not the best fit for this job. Whether
No.
it's John Gross at Akron, Rob Senderoff at Kent State, I think they are probably going to be more linked with, a Big East or a Big Ten job opening. Maybe the Carolinas, Furman, Bradley, Liberty, Takayo Siddle from UNC Wilmington, maybe. But I think, like I said, I think they're better suited for an ACC or an SEC job. There's one more name, doesn't have the Big 12 experience, but he has the winning experience, and it was just his first year this year at New Mexico. But I
Yep.
think Eric Olin is going to be a candidate here. He took UC San Diego to 30 plus wins last year and had won quite a few games before last year. And he's got New Mexico right on the bubble here. I think that's somewhere that Kansas State could go.
Yeah, and I think another one as well, Sean, is look at Casey Alexander, the Belmont head coach right now.
Yep.
Also doesn't have any Big 12 experience, but he has been coaching at the head coach level in Division One since 2011 between Stetson, Lipscomb in Nashville, and then going across the street to Belmont. And he's got Belmont playing at a really high level this year. It's been their best season in a long, long time, probably since the COVID year. So look, the Belmont Bruins are looking really good. And they're close to having an at-large tournament bid. I think if they just keep winning in the MVC, they'll be right there, and they're not going to have a problem getting, potentially an at-large bid if they don't win their conference championship. So look out for him as well. Plenty of candidates. I still think you're going to have somebody that's got some sort of Power Four, Power Five experience, specifically in the Big 12. I think that's kind of the identity Kansas State's going to be looking for.
There's one other name, Mike, that I think might be the 1B to Josh Schertz in terms of jump seats this year. And it's maybe not the best fit, but I think Jared Calhoun from Utah State is going to be linked
Yeah,
with the biggest openings this coaching carousel, and we don't know where Kansas State's going to stack up in terms of is it the best job, is it the fifth best, is it the eighth
yeah.
best? I'd have to say now I don't think any of the huge names are going to open from firings unless there's something
Yeah.
unforeseen. So I think these middle of the pack Power Five teams are probably going to be some of the best jobs available, like Ohio State, Providence. Um, Other than that, like there might not be a lot of openings this year. So I think Jared Calhoun and Josh Ertz will probably get the best two jobs available. If one of them's Kansas State, then maybe they can pull over Calhoun from Utah State. Not exactly the Big 12 experience, but Mountain West pretty close to Power 5.
Yeah.
I think he's probably the last name that I could see, unless they go completely off the rails and get an NBA assistant or something. But I don't see that in the age of NIL and how they're operating. I think they'll probably get a head coach who's already been a head coach
Yeah.
and has won some games. But I think it's Calhoun and Schertz are probably your 1 and 2 options, and if you can get either one of them, great. If not, then I think you need to get more creative and see which mid-major head coach you really like.
And look, I still think there could 100% be a domino effect of head coaches going
Yeah,
down. You look at a couple of blue bloods. Look, if North Carolina, if they stumble coming down the stretch and they lose early in the NCAA tournament, Hubert Davis could very well be gone. Like he's not off the hot seat right now, nor is Mark Pope. Similar strategy. If they don't get out of the first round in the NCAA tournament, they bottom out through the rest of the season. His head could be on the chopping block as well. So there's still plenty of jobs that could lead to some coaching turnover. Not going to be anything like it was 2 years ago when we had so many high profile jobs come up, but it still could be a little bit of an interesting coaching carousel depending on how some of these blue bloods finish out the season.
and in terms of other head coaches, Mike, that might be on their way out and they might go to Kansas State to like save face maybe a little bit. I think there's some thoughts there that maybe Forbes from Wake Forest could be out of there and might want to go before he's fired officially. In terms of other, oh, not a ton come to mind, and I've looked at a couple articles here, and I think we've hit all the names, but it is a pretty solid job that has opened up here, especially in the NIL era. They've got a really unique home court, the Octagon. We've seen that
Yeah.
weaponized just a couple of years ago, and there's a chance this is the biggest. Like I said, chances it's the fifth biggest. We'll try and get to do a video on all of the big names, and then when they're hired, we'll do another one. But Mike, let's wrap this up with who's your prediction for the next Kansas State head coach?
I'm going to stick with my guy, Matt Brower, Stephen F. Austin head coach. I think it's going to slip to him. He's got a lot of that experience. So, yeah, going to go with Matt Brower, Stephen F. Austin head coach, had a good first season there.
This is a tough one because, like I said, we don't know what other jobs are open. I'm gonna go
Yeah.
with Eric Olin as my prediction. I think that he is a good head coach that would do just fine out there in Manhattan. All right, well, that's where we're going to wrap it up. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Please be sure to check out the other videos if you haven't already, and we'll see you next time.